I was always an artistically inclined child. I come also from a family where my parents were very artistic. So while it was not a very conventional choice, but I think to a certain extent it did come naturally to me. Whenever you're working with global brands, and especially consumer brands, you have to keep in mind two things. One is you need to constantly remind yourself that there is a global strategy that you need to adhere to, right? Because then these brands need to look consistent across the globes and geographies, and you need to kind of protect the sanctity of the brands.
Hi, Tanu, and welcome to the Iconic Women podcast. I'm super, super excited to have you here. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm so glad that it's finally working out. So, thanks for coming all the way from Gurgaon. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Kadambari. I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, I'm glad I could finally make it. You have a great initiative going on here,
Thank you.
Iconic Women podcast, and it's really an honor to be here. So I'm really looking forward to a good conversation today with you.
Yeah, great. I mean, how long has it been, right? I think the last time we met was like maybe 18 years ago or something like that.
18, 20 years. I think we've lost the count of the years, but
maybe it's better
been
to do
that.
It's
been a very long time. Yeah.
But yeah, so from back in the day, from when we were in NID together, and now it's been a long journey. You've come a very long way. So maybe let's start unboxing that. What has it been like for you from then until now?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and I'm really glad that NID happened to be part of my journey, because I think it has been one of the most pivotal moments of my life when I decided to join NID, take design as a career. Because I come from a background where design was not really the most preferred career option for young professionals at that in that time and age, and to be able to make that choice and then live that career journey as a designer over the years has just been phenomenal. And when I look back, I think about the times when I was thinking about this whole think about what is the right career choice for me. I was always an artistically inclined child. I come also from a family where my parents were very artistic. So while it was not a very conventional choice, but I think to a certain extent it did come naturally to me. So it's just been amazing.
And I think there is something about that process of going through design education, right? And I think there's something non-reversible about it. It kind of makes you think in a certain way, and it makes you think that way for life.
Yes.
And sometimes I feel like we start solving non-design processes through a design lens.
Yes.
Does that happen to you?
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you're saying it, Kadambari, because I have always felt that. And irrespective of where I am and what I'm doing, I could be at work, I could be at home. I think what design education gives you is the ability to look at everything through the lens. So you're constantly looking at what is the real problem, what seems on the face of it may not be the real problem. And I think it kind of always, there is always a voice inside of you that constantly says, let's dig deeper, let's know more, let's identify the real problem. What are the more ways to solve it? How can we quickly prototype ideas, etc. So I think it's genuinely a great tool at the hands of all of us that we can leverage, and that's why you would also see, I think nowadays, more and more, even businesses, even academics is leveraging design thinking, right? A couple of years ago, I think in India we added design thinking as a part of the curriculum in schools, and it was a big surprise for me, but also I think it is something that gave me great joy to know that now our kids will be learning design thinking in school, for which we had to actually go to a design institution. So yeah, completely agree with what you said.
So, you were saying that you loved to draw as a kid. So, if I can take you back,
Yeah.
what was life like growing up? I know that you're from UP.
Yes.
What was it like?
I come from a small city, but my parents were both very artistically driven. My father is an entrepreneurial person. He left his government job to take up a profession. To actually build a couple of his own companies. My mother is a retired professor of fine arts, so there was a lot of conversation at home about art and also academics and also entrepreneurship. So while there was a lot of culturally relevant, I would say, learnings at home. Like
Yeah.
my mother, while she was a professional person, but I think she was very deeply rooted in culture. At the same time, we were always inspired to dream big, stay humble. I think the conversations about what is your purpose in life, what are you going to do, what are you going to make of the life you have. I think it was very common for us to have those kind of conversations
Wow.
at home. And I think growing up, witnessing my parents having the journey they were having, I would say, especially for my father, a very unconventional career journey, and to be able to be quite successful in it, find a lot of happiness in it, I think has always been a great joy for me. And even now, at this age, he's completely devoted to what he's doing. He's so passionate about it. So I think having a small town life in that sense was a great balance for me in terms of you had the luxury of time and also I think the warmth that you feel in human connections is something that we really felt growing up. So I think that also kind of had
Amazing.
a lasting impact on who I am today.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And when that slowness has kind
Yes.
of converted into what I imagine is quite a
Yeah.
fast paced life, how do you deal with that?
I think because it happened over a course of time, like
Yeah.
from my hometown, Lakhimpur, where I was born, and I did my primary education, and then I moved to a slightly, then I moved to Ahmedabad, so I moved to a bigger city, and then I moved to Pune, which was again a city of a similar scale. So I think the pace changed over the time. I don't think I quite realized the shift.
Sure.
It's just that when you kind of look back, you see where you came from and where you are today. But I think over the time, I kind of naturally picked the pace of things. And now I think I'm at a point where I kind of truly enjoy where I am.
So, back in the day when we were about to hit college, design wasn't really a thing, right?
Yes.
It's not the first thing that would have come to our minds, even,
Agree.
let alone our parents. So, how did that work out for you?
Yeah, it's a very funny story actually. So in school, I was learning science and I was actually learning to become an engineer because it was like the right thing to do. You could get a job right after college, you could make a living out of it. So that is what I was planning to do. But because I was so interested in art, I would always sit and sketch and make doodles at the back of my notebook. And I remember I had a friend who used to sit next to me, and she used to say that, "Why don't you do design?" And and that is how it actually all started for me because back at home, art was a thing, but design was not like something that was talked about. Even like the term design was not so popular back
Right,
then,
of
right?
course.
Nobody
Absolutely.
actually thought design was a thing, right?
Yeah.
So that is how it started for me. And I always say that I didn't choose design chose me. Because I think that one conversation I had with my friend back then is what prompted me to give a phone call to my father back home. And I asked my father if he knew about design and if he knew about NID. And to my surprise, he did. I wouldn't have imagined a person living in a small town would know about design. And he didn't. He had never had like a training in art or design. While even back then he used to run his own printing press and he was running his own newspaper, so all of that was there. I still remember the days when he used to hand design his logos, for the
Wow.
clients. So all of that was there, but I don't think anybody called it design per se back
Right.
then. But thankfully dad knew about it, so he said, "Oh yes, I know about design. I think it's great." And he also said that, I wish in my childhood, I had an opportunity to do this. And now that you have an opportunity, I think you should. But I think until even then as well, I wasn't quite sure about it. I don't think even they knew that this is going to really happen for all of us.
Yeah.
But yes, I applied for the NID entrance. I got through NID, and it was just, I mean, the rest of it is history.
Yeah, and
Yeah, there
that
was
was
no,
that.
I
Right, of
think
course.
that's how it kind of panned out for a lot of us in that
Amazing.
sense. Yes.
And then, when we also kind of go through that next rite of passage is when it
Yeah.
comes time to finish college and then go out into the
Yeah.
industry. And we go out as complete greenhorns.
Yes.
We really are very clueless about the world, definitely about our industry and about design. What was that like for you, initially? Those first few years, which are very formative, where we are hungry, we want to absorb, we want to learn. How was
Yeah.
that for you?
So I think I was quite lucky enough to get an internship in an interdisciplinary studio based out of Pune. It was called Onio at that time. It was run by two gentlemen, NID graduates, and they used to run. And they were looking for a graphic designer at that time. I reached out to them. I got an opportunity to for a 6 months internship where I worked across a varied set of clients. I think their clientele ranged from FMCG to automobile to fashion. I think at
And you
that
went in as a communication
I
designer?
went in as a graphic designer because I
Yeah.
studied graphic design at NID. But interestingly, I think a couple of things happened there in a period of 6 months. I got an opportunity to work with different clients. At the same time, I also got an opportunity to work beyond what I had studied. So I was not only doing branding there, but I was also doing ethnographic research. I was learning about trend research. So that was new for me, and I think it was very interesting. And apart from that, while it was a small studio, they at that time coincidentally there were two people from one person I think was from Denmark and the other person was from Italy, designers who were also doing a short-term project there. So I think it was like a very short but highly exposed phase for me. I think which was very helpful eventually because you kind of learn to work with people from different backgrounds, also sometimes nationalities, and you
Absolutely.
learn how they work and how you work and where can you drive synergies, what you can learn from them. And sometimes it's also surprising to know that how it's the same design process everybody's following across the world. So in that sense, it's also very reassuring that what you're doing is the right thing
The
to
first
do.
time you discover that, right?
Yes,
That's true.
exactly. So I think that was really good. I also learned a lot of my work ethics, I think, in my first job because I also continued eventually to work with them for another year. And I think some of those work ethics I still use and apply because I think your first job as a young adult uh, kind of tends to leave a lot of impression on your
Definitely.
on who you eventually end up becoming as a professional person.
And then cut to packaging. Because packaging design is a lot of what you
Yes.
do. At least that's the part that's visible to us, right? What you do at PepsiCo with your team. How did packaging design come about? Is it something that you were always interested in? Was it just something that was thrown at you?
Yeah.
And then, did you kind of become fascinated with it right from the beginning? Or how did that come about?
I mean, I would say it was something that was thrown at me in the sense that actually packaging design was never my first love. I was
Okay.
always more interested in identity, corporate branding,
Yeah.
and I think I tried to stay away from packaging in the initial few years of my life. I would not like go out and look for that kind of projects.
Sure.
Obviously, when you're working somewhere, whatever comes your way, you pick it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a project. It wouldn't be a project I would raise my hand for. But I think during the course of my stint in different places, one of which was also in a broadcast branding agency. And then when I moved to Elephant Delhi office, they offered uh, me a role where I was expected to build packaging design muscle for the office.
Which
And
was a department that they were kind of working on at the time.
yeah, I mean, at that time, Elephant Design Delhi was not doing a lot of packaging work. Pune
Right.
office used to do. Pune office has historically done a lot
Of
of
course.
packaging
Yeah.
work, but Delhi office did not do a lot of packaging work at that time. And given my background from NID, and I thought I would be a good person to kind of take that role. And I just took that. I took it as a challenge, to be honest, because I think one thing that I try and do is that I try and go to uncomfortable places and do things which would kind of challenge me in a good way and also help me learn something new. So I think with that mindset, I took that opportunity, and I was like, I mean, yeah, it's a kind of design. I mean, how difficult or how different could it be, right? Ultimately, it's the same design process
Yeah,
that you're applying.
absolutely.
If you look at everything in a way that there is a problem at the table, you have to solve it, then everything else is a medium, right? So I mean, I went with that mindset, and initially it was a bit of a learning curve for me, but I think the more I worked on it, the scope of the work kept increasing, the scale of the brands kept changing, and the more and more I pushed myself to do it, I kind of found my it started to become inspiring for me. I think I started to get better at it. So I think that's how it kind of yeah
Yeah, and
led me into
so
that
the work
space.
that you do now at PepsiCo, it's very very kind of customer facing, right? It's so many of us are interacting with your work in that sense. Um, did it start out that way? How long have you been there, and what has that been like?
So I mean, I've been now would be finishing 5 years at PepsiCo in the role that I have, and again, the good thing was that the the scale of the brands has grown for me over the years in a certain fashion. So I think my one role has prepared me for my second role.
Right.
So, like for example, when I was leading the design lab at Nestle, and the work that I was doing there on all the brands, whether it was chocolates or noodles or dairy or baby food, I think that work prepared me for the stint that I was going to eventually take at PepsiCo. So while at the design lab there, I was not part of the organization. Nestle was my client, but at the same time, I think
So
it
this
was the
was
closest.
through Elephant.
No, this was after Elephant.
Okay,
This was
and then
after
so
Elephant.
after Elephant, what did you do?
After Elephant, I actually moved to Landor. I mean, erstwhile Fitch.
I see. Yes.
It was. I mean, Landor and Fitch used to be separate entities at that point in
Right.
time,
Right.
and Nestle was my client.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, so that's
I
how
get it
it
now.
kind of
Yeah.
turned out to be. But it was again, as I said, it was the closest proxy I could have had to what I do now in terms of how you work with scaled brands, how you look at mass FMCG in a way that you continue to make it more and more relevant for the changing needs of the consumer.
Right.
uh, how do you study and understand consumer needs, trends, and then constantly elevate the role of the brands that they can play in the lives of people? And again, I mean, it's the same. I mean, at PepsiCo also, that is always our endeavor, that how do we constantly leverage design to kind of make our brands more and more relevant for the people we would engage with and touch their lives
Sure.
through our brands.
And when we are working with design, we're also working with business.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a little bit of this stereotype about how design and business kind of you need to understand each other
Yeah.
better, or other designers need to understand business better. I think that's changing, and I
Yeah.
hope it's changing fast enough. But how did these two
Yeah.
work together under your watch?
I think what happens in cases like these is that when you start with a very clear business objective, then all the various functions come together to just meet that objective. And then it does not matter through which lens you're approaching it. Are you approaching it as a marketer? Are you approaching it as a designer? Are you approaching it as an R&D person? Because you have a very clear objective in front of your
Right.
eye. At that point, what you need is collaboration, um, staying true to your intent, that the intent is to grow the brand, or create something that is relevant for people. So I think as long as you stick to that, I think the journey becomes very easy. And at least that is what I have felt and has been my personal experience. So, and then I think in that process, you also challenge each other sometimes, right? You challenge the status quo. There is also healthy competition.
Right.
You bring in your learnings from different places, and I think everybody does it. We also do that as designers. I mean, I think people from other functions do that as a specialists in their own field. So, in my experience, it works wonderfully. And I think what we all get as an advantage in this process is we get to learn something that we don't know of. Like, I think working with brands, the brands that I work with and working with PepsiCo, the biggest advantage that I have is that I get to learn so much about business.
Right. I'm sure.
And as a creative person, I feel it's a privilege.
Absolutely.
Because it's very difficult to know that unless you are part of the business.
Right.
So it does bring its own challenges, but I think the payoff is massive. Yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah. If
And
you can
there's
appreciate it.
there's also the creative aspect of your work.
Yeah.
So I really love the way that PepsiCo kind of is so culturally inclusive.
Yeah.
There's so much storytelling. There is,
Yeah.
for whether it's Eid or it's Holi, there'll be some, like a news story. And it's so beautifully done and executed. And at the same time, it's strung together with a sort of consistency, which isn't rigid, but it's there.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about narrative building that you and your design team do.
Yeah. So, see what happens that whenever you're working with global brands, and especially consumer brands, you have to keep in mind two things. One is you need to constantly remind yourself that there is a global strategy that you need to adhere to,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
then these brands need to look consistent across the globes and geographies, and you need to kind of protect the sanctity of the brands. At the same time, you need to make these global brands locally relevant. So that is a huge part of what we do. It's, not just in India, but also globally we do that. And in order to do that, you need to understand the culture very closely. And we do that. We also not try to do everything on all the brands. So
How do you mean?
pick. So what I mean is that you pick in terms of, for example, if we are activating a festival, what festival is relevant for which brand?
Right.
Depending on which is the cohort we are talking to. Because most of our brands would have different kind of consumer group we are talking to.
Yeah.
So what we do on what brand is also an important part of the process. And then what is the expression you are using? What is the art style you are using? What are the elements you're picking from? Or what kind of iconography you're picking? Then also, I think another thing that comes into play is working with the local talent, because I think things like art is something which is, the way I think local talent can do it. It's difficult to, kind of outsource everything. From
So
that point
depending
of
on the
view.
geography, you also engage local artists, illustrators.
We do engage. And by local, I also meant that, like, for example, when we are working for campaigns in India, India design team would work on it. So, that is one way when I say global and local. And then, for example, if we are working on something for, say, West Bengal, we do engage and collaborate with artists from that region. So,
Beautiful.
so that it looks authentic, and
Absolutely.
we also learn in the process from them,
Yeah.
because I think art and craft and folk art in India is so rich and so diverse that it's, you can, it's like an ocean. You can never know it enough, and you can never do it enough. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's so rich. That whole world is so rich and powerful.
And so
So, yeah.
there's this entire artistic piece on the one hand, right, that we want to dive into, and we kind of,
Right.
as creative professionals, would really want to express that.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, like you mentioned, it is a multinational which kind of has some of its own sort of rules and regulations and standards and ways of doing things. So, what is, if I can ask you that typical question, what is the best thing about working with a large multinational like
Yeah.
PepsiCo, and then what is something that kind of is challenging?
I think the best thing or the most rewarding thing is obviously when you see the impact of the work you do. So the amount of lives you touch every day with a bag of chip or, with the cans that we make, I think that's the most rewarding part. I don't think you understand the impact of it unless you actually go through that journey. And the challenging part would be, I would say that whenever you're working with scaled businesses and brands, there is a huge responsibility. So, as they always say, with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
I think while I quite enjoy it, but you have to constantly design with freedom and caution at the same time. So I think the complexity, the diversity of different consumer groups that you have to constantly talk to, design for, I think is the tough part. But again, I think there is. I think creativity needs challenges to thrive. So if you ask me, I really look at it from that lens, because if there are no enough problems to solve, then I mean, what is the role of design anyway?
Right, absolutely. And I think also, speaking of diversity, um, the output, right, from an organization like yours is so kind of culturally diverse. It seems like, inclusivity is a big thing for you guys. And yet at the same time, it's quite complex because depending on which geography you're in, which part of the world you're in, there's very different kind of expression and storytelling that's going on. Um, what does navigation through that look like? Because there's decision making at the end of this. There is creativity, and like you said, there's also caution. So how do you kind of take these decisions?
When there are specialized functions to do their job, their expertise is respected.
Right.
So their decision making is trusted, and I think that makes the whole thing easier um, uh, to land. Otherwise, it will become extremely difficult. So when design team comes into the picture, uh, they know what they have to do. They know what they have to deliver. They're trusted, and then trusted and respected. So beyond a point, I think those complexities become easy to manage.
Right.
And then I think if you talk of cultural diversity, again, I think the same philosophy kind of applies there. So, for example, when you are working on something for a specific market, we would lean on to the leaders and the teams working in those markets,
Right.
and we would let them lead the agenda. And that really simplifies, because I don't know if there is any other way to move forward. You have to let people take their pieces and run with them,
And lead those.
and lead those. And I think PepsiCo does that beautifully. It really empowers you to run with your agendas and do your thing, and they will trust you. And I think that is what kind of makes things happen.
How does your department and also PepsiCo in general use AI to kind of get closer to what consumer needs are and to customize for those?
I mean, I can speak from the design lens.
Sure.
I feel AI is a great tool for efficiency and speed. So we are at a stage where we are leveraging AI to create multiple visualizations of ideas in a short span of time. But not so much for final execution, because I think AI also is at a stage where it's evolving, it's developing. At the same time, you also need people to kind of, it's like you need somebody in the driver's seat to kind
Absolutely.
of make AI work. So it's a learning process for all of us. I think we're all embracing the new technology.
And, working with creative professionals, taking them on these journeys,
Yeah.
sometimes through years that they would be in your team and grow as designers. What does mentorship look like to you? within your team and also outside of it? Because as designers, we want to give back, right, to the design community, to maybe students. So what does that look like for you?
One, you need to identify what is the unique talent that an individual has. Because while we are all designers, we are all great at that one thing.
Right.
And I think during the course of our journeys, we realize that, we discover that, let's say. And sometimes other people can help us discover it. We may not do that discovery ourselves. So I think as people who have come a little far further ahead of others in the journey, I think should help people who are still coming up identify what their unique talent is and how we kind of nurture it. How do we respect people for who they are? I think the second would be helping them identify what their dreams and goals are, and how we can sort of align ourselves to their goals also to a certain extent. So obviously there is a larger goal of the team and the organization, but I think when we are together in a journey, I think those individual goals also matter. So there should be enough conversations on what are people's individual goals, because then everybody feels part of the larger family. So I think that would be another. I think from an external mentorship point of view, I feel that while technology has really changed how we find information about things, so I'm sure you can resonate with this, that when we had to know anything about design, I mean, like you had to really make a phone call, and if the person knows and answers, it was the only way to find.
Or
There
to go
weren't
to the
enough,
library,
or go to the
look in the right
library.
shelf, go through
Yes,
books.
yes, and then I don't think there were enough libraries in small towns where people would could go and learn about design, right? But I think
Right.
technology has changed that, especially the way digitization is happening in our country, right? Internet has really reached to even the smaller corners of the world. So obviously, I think the new generation or the aspirants of design know a lot more than I think we knew back then. Having said that, I think what people like us can do is really bring them through the real life examples, those success stories, those case studies from the industry. Because I think the application is what we need to show to them. So I think that is where mentorship comes into picture. The other could also be, you know, co-creating curriculum with institutions, because I think that there is a need to uh, create programs uh, where when young designers are coming out of colleges, they're more industry ready. I think that gap also is a place where I think industry leaders can kind of lean on to and try and fill that gap,
Sure.
and it benefits I think both sides.
Of course, yeah.
And then, of course, if there can be any other industry academics engagement platforms that can be built, where the two could come together and exchange of knowledge and even challenges. Like, I mean, I think we also need to understand what is it that young designers are looking for. I think what we wanted and what they wanted, I'm sure it's different because so much time has gone by.
No, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
design now has become such a buzzword. It's become such a trending profession. There are design schools that are mushrooming all over the country,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
What do you see as the gaps, when there are freshers that come in from design schools into the industry?
So I think the young designers these days are good at using the tools because there are enough training programs,
Yeah.
and then technology has also come so far. Like the amount of softwares we have these days, and again AI. We have to go back to that, right? There is so much that AI can do for you. So I think the execution part, I think in that sense is what young designers are good at. The two things that I feel could be potential gaps. One is that are we investing enough time in the early stages of the project? Are we patient enough to really deep dive, understand what the problem is? Who are we doing this for? What is the best way to do it? So I think that is one part. The other part is the craftsmanship. I think it could sound slightly old fashioned, but I think craftsmanship is extremely important in design. And that part sometimes get missed.
Moving the lens of inspiration to the other side now, who is that person from the design industry that has really been an inspiration for you?
I mean, there's so many stalwarts. I mean, it would be difficult to pick, but I think one person that really shines for me would be Coco Chanel.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Okay.
uh, I think as an outsider, I think the way she became pretty much an innovator in the industry, in the fashion industry, I think was very inspiring for me. Again, I think she came from a very unconventional approach to fashion for those times. And then she pretty much ruled the, Parisian couture for almost 6 decades. And even up till now, I think she created a brand which, I mean, it's not just a brand, it's a legacy, right? That she built for herself.
Absolutely.
And who doesn't love to wear Chanel? I think Andy Warhol, again, very unconventional and an artistic approach to commercial work and design. I think his sense of his graphic style for me was very pop culture, bold, colorful,
Absolutely.
lovely. I've seen some of his work in some of the art galleries. It's just amazing. I would say Paula Scher beautifully transcends the boundary between fine arts and design. And then I think closer to home, Dashrath Patel, I think an excellent multidisciplinary designer, very progressive for his, again, unconventional for his times.
Right.
So I think those would be some of the very inspirational people for me.
It's kind of difficult for us to dissociate Indra Nui with PepsiCo, and I know that she's no longer the CEO, but there's something about her that is just so kind of magnetic. She's so kind of honest and supportive, and so relevant. Has she left any impression on you?
Indra Nooyi is really a very iconic and powerful woman. She's been one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. She's always been a great sponsor also for design. Uh, and I also had the privilege to read her book, My Life in Full. And in her book, she talks a lot about integration of family and work for young people. And
Okay.
I think that's one subject that is very close to my heart as well. As a woman leader who's also a mother, I think the struggle is real.
It is.
And I think irrespective of the fact whether you're a mother or the father, because I also have a very supportive partner. So I think his struggle is as much as my struggle because we are both working. And what I love about Indra is that she takes the gender out of it. She says that men and women equally need the support. Families need the support. Aging parents need the support, and I feel that is so real and not and is a subject not enough talked about. And I think that's a message that she's trying to, give to the world. And she's been working in that field to bring a social change. I think it's very impactful. And then there is one line that she said I think in one of her interviews where she said, if you want a seat at the table, pull a chair.
Make it happen for yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love it because it puts the onus back at you.
Absolutely.
For to go out and look for opportunities, to work on yourself, have confidence. So I think it is again something that has really stayed with me.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, amazing. How could it not?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of women who are an inspiration, if there was one woman from history who has meant something to you, who would that be and why?
Frida Kahlo, I would
Okay.
say. Yeah. Such a wonderful artist. I mean, a lot of her work is born out of tragedy, unfortunately. But I think the real beauty of work is, how you see her personal life. At the same time, her awareness of the politics and the society at that time. all coming together in her work in a very unique style, which is a very unique Frida Kahlo style. The iconic fashion style that she developed for her own self. I think she was doing it unconsciously, probably.
I think a
Yeah.
little bit of that was also born from tragedy
Yes.
because
Yes.
because of her accidents, she had a wasted limb.
Yeah.
And because of that, she would kind of wear these really large, what are called Maria skirts,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
then develop this slightly native
Yes.
Mexican way of
Yes.
dressing. And
All of it.
so, you know that on the Iconic Women podcast, that's one of the things we do is that we
Yeah.
dress our guest up as the woman that they admire and that means something to them. So I hope that you're going to enjoy this process of us transforming you into Frida.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. Can't
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well. I think she's
Yes.
one of my icons for sure, definitely, personally. And I started out this project with her.
Yeah, I remember. I
So
remember. I've seen you dressed as Frida Kahlo, and you look gorgeous, by the way.
thanks. But yeah, she was, I think, a great inspiration for me as well and continues to be. So I think let's just get right into that and see how we do. Frida Kahlo is someone who's really been an icon for me for many, many years. For the look, we got a Mexican blouse and combined it with a scarf because Frida also wore a lot of scarves and stoles and shawls and things like that. And then, of course, we did the unibrow without which Frida isn't Frida, and we sort of did an updo with braids for the hair and a little bit of flowers. We mixed natural flowers with plastic ones and kind of got the look together. So thank you so much, Tanu, for coming all the way and for being on this podcast. It's been really close to my heart because I've been waiting to have a designer, to as a guest to kind of have a really sort of meaningful unboxing conversation with. And I think that's just, you're the perfect person for that. So thanks so much. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Kadambari. I'm very honored to be the first designer on your show. So, yeah, it's been wonderful. Love the candid chat we had. And thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you.